Finding any information on Joyce Ladner proved to be a challenge at first, and the only stuff that came out of my searches was random videos on YouTube and interviews with her. But eventually I have found out this excellent article about her and her career as a sociologist and her social activist career as well, which started fairly early in her life. The article's name is Joyce Ladner, The Odyssey of an Ambivalent Sociologist, and it was written by Harriet Jackson Scarupa. The article, like I already said, covers a lot of her history. So it comes up that she was born on October 12, 1943 in Battles, Mississippi, where she grows up more or less until she's 19, where she really starts her career as a social activist. During that time, there was an event that triggered public outrage, much like Trayvon Martin's murder recently triggered just the same. The person's name was Emmett Till, and what Ladner herself talks about all of that event is that it came as a clarion call for action, to do something. And that's basically where she started her career as a social activist. She joins the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SNCC, and there she spends a lot of time just being politically active, doing different drives for educating black people to go vote and to register voters, which got her into trouble with the law at the same time. But she also works just shoulder to shoulder with a lot of the prominent figures from the civil rights movement. She eventually also helps organize the NAACP Youth Council in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And later on, as she becomes a student in Tougaloo, she is also one of the people that was responsible for raising funds for the Civil Rights March in Washington, where Dr. Martin Luther King gave the I Have a Dream speech. There was actually a joke in one of her interviews that she spoke about, and she said that every time it used to be said that every time she would go on one of these fundraising trips, that by the time she came back there would be enough money to send another busload of black people to the march up in Washington. Another remarkable thing about her is just her career as a sociologist. She earned a PhD in sociology at the age of 24 from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. However, she was thoroughly unsatisfied with how the American sociology and American society in general treated blacks in the disparate way that has always been apparently the case. So she refuses a bunch of really good positions and prominent positions in colleges and different universities around the country, and she basically accepts positions where she is in touch with the underprivileged, where she can give back to the community, because there was a part of her that felt ambivalent about being in a position of privilege and honor when her people are just being downtrodden and treated differently and basically being subjugated. Eventually she gets over this feeling, and she realizes that she would have a better platform for her message if she actually had a platform to stand on. So some of the accolades that she has, this is just some of them because all of them would take too much time to enumerate. She became the interim president of the Howard University in Washington. She has been one of the board members for the American Sociological Association for decades, and she has at some point been appointed by President Clinton at the time as the Financial Responsibility and Management Assistant Authority for the District of Columbia. That was in 1995. Um, that was as far as her credentials go. Really important and really a distinguished career, really, there. As a sociologist, she takes upon herself to bring to light the plight of her own people, which would be the black minority in the U.S., and to expose just generally how life works from within. She sets up and works on several different studies with women, children, youth, family, and generally covers gender and class inequality, as well as race. She writes about these things, and she always tries to empower the underprivileged and disenfranchised in our nation. Um, she writes a book about these things that is titled "Titles That Bind," and in a sense, it becomes a manual on how to teach children after the civil rights movement of how to treat life and having to deal with racism as black kids. As far as sociological theory, in our class, really, Ladner most definitely holds a feminist view in sociology. Her position really became evident as I was studying her interests and her specific knack for seeing from within how the black community just exists, how it relates to the dominant American culture. So her interest in minority is one of the main reasons why I believe that she is a feminist. One of the most important things that she ever wrote was a book called The Death of White Sociology. And in this book, she actually tackles a prevalent view in American sociology of the time in the 70s, which was completely biased, even without really knowing so. Apparently, the sociologists of the time, being mainly white, treated the black society as a deviant group that stands out from the main category, which would be the white nuclear family in America. So she writes this book, and it's like a set of articles, a set of researches and scholarly works like that that speak of how exactly the bias shows itself, even in sociology. And she calls out the system as is, as sociology is supposed to be impartial and professional. We as humans are really incapable of achieving this because we always come from somewhere, and that set of rules or I guess just the cultural bubble that we live in always colors our opinions, and we cannot escape from that. So we need somebody like her in this case to bring out from within, understanding also our position, but shedding a clearer view on life from her group. So as someone who's interested in actually changing the world, I found her position and her interests really, really interesting. And there's a quote here that I'm going to read where she is labeled as more than just a scholar in sociology. She is actually somebody that, like me, was trying to change the world for the better. And these are the words. I choose to be what I call a scholar activist because I don't feel that scholarship necessarily should be used solely for the transmission of knowledge. This just really spoke to me as where I am as well, and this is one of the things that kind of brought her to life as a person, as not just as a sociologist or as a topic of a study that I have to do for this class. And it's really interesting for me to see during the various interviews that I watched on YouTube as well, how that progressed over time and how she deals with this burden of trying to change the world while the world doesn't want to be changed, because there's that counteraction to her intent, even though it's the noblest of things that she's trying to achieve. Um, so later on, she goes to Africa, to Nigeria, and she is studying and teaching there as well. And from there, one of her thoughts was like this. She says, "There was a sense that we could take lessons learned in Africa and bring them back to apply them in America. There was disillusionment about integration as a movement, so we wanted to know how to implement a self-help approach to building the black community." And this is one of the questions that I would really, really like to pick her brain on, because as a person, I mean, she was a social activist at the age of 19, and as she progresses in her career, there's obviously going to be some mistakes or second thoughts, as hindsight always comes as 2020. But I would love to be able to pick somebody's brain like hers, because she has so much success behind her in changing the world, but she also has very many regrets. And by focusing on the regrets or the mistakes, I would hope and not trying to repeat them as I learn more of her. Anyways, Joyce Ladner is obviously one of the most prominent black sociologists in America as of late. And it's really a shame that I've never even heard of her before this assignment. So thank you very much for allowing me to do more digging around this topic.